Welcome once again, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, to Mysteries from Beyond the Other Dominion. I'm your host, Dr. Franklin Rule, and today we're going to investigate the mysterious Vamana of ancient India, tell you about the American monster known as Momo, report on the funeral for a fly, probe the ghosts of Nathan Hale, and reveal the details of an intriguing theory concerning the death of the dinosaurs. But first, the Vamana of ancient India. Sanskrit texts, such as the Rig Veda and the Mahabharata, describe the exploits of their god of war, Indra. They say he flew through the sky in a machine known as a Vamana, which translates as aerial car. This vehicle was capable of fantastic speed. 16 different types of heat-absorbing alloys went into its construction. Its propulsion was based on a combination of electrical, chemical, and solar energy. The Vamanas could make themselves invisible. They could throw up screens to protect themselves from attack. They had devices for scanning the terrain as they flew over it. The Vamanas were appointed with destructive laser beam-like weapons, for they did engage in battle with one another. Many a time, Vamanas were reported crashing to the ground after such a horrendous battle. And they had another arsenal of weapons strictly for use against populations on the ground. Indeed, the destruction of one city is described as follows. The world shuddered in fever, scorched by the terrible heat of this weapon. Elephants burst into flame. Rivers boiled. The armies of the enemy were mowed down. Forests collapsed in splintered rows. But how could this technology have been possible 12,000 years ago? It certainly sounds like modern laser or nuclear weapons were involved in the attack on that city. But of course, Indians from 12,000 years ago did not have such weaponry. The only solution? ETs and UFOs that were called Vamanas were actually exploring ancient India at that time. This explains what Indra was, probably an ET from an advanced civilization that paid a visit to Earth over 12,000 years ago. Now, when we return, all about Momo, the American monster. Stay tuned. Don't go away. Welcome back, and time now for Momo, America's monster. But first, the trivia question of the day. Let me extricate it here from its paper prison for you. That question: in which state was Momo sighted? Now the prize, the only prize, one pat on the back that you'll have to administer to yourself if and only if you get the correct answer. I'll take a sip of water and be back momentarily. Okay, I'm calling time. Again, in which state was Momo sighted? The answer, Missouri. His name Momo means Missouri monster. The first sighting of this critter was back on July 11th, 1972 at 3:30 p.m. in the small town of Louisiana, Missouri. An 8-year-old boy, Terry Harrison, reported seeing a creature that was 7 feet tall, had black shaggy hair, and made unusual growls. It also was carrying what appeared to be a small animal, perhaps a dog. The boy said that when his eyes made contact with Momo, Momo ran off. At first, of course, there's a great deal of disbelief. After all, this was an 8-year-old boy reporting the sighting of a creature. However, during the next 3 weeks, over 100 eyewitnesses in and around that area of Missouri spotted a creature very much like the boy originally described.
I was called to my home off from my work, and my daughter Doris and my son Terry said that there was a big creature of some sort in behind the house in the ditch where Terry was playing. It smells more like a hog lot or or a cow lot mixed. Worse than that, it even burns your nose.
One guy lives up here in Salt River, north of Louisiana. Called up and said he saw Momo swimming across Salt River.
Now, what was he? Well, possibly he was a black bear, but the locals know their bears and say he was not a bear. Indeed, that his growls were unbear-like. Another possibility was that he was a cryptozoological entity, a mutant monster that had been hidden long in the hinterlands of Middle America and seen only briefly that 1 month. Yet another possibility is that he was an alien creature, that Momo was actually a secondary alien being dropped by more intelligent ones to test our response to it. Indeed, he called it the Great Hairy Biped from outer space. Basically, all of the sightings of Momo were alike, and virtually everyone reported that he smelled worse than a goat. Imagine that, worse than a goat. Now, by the end of July, the flap had ended, but Momo went down in the annals of cryptozoology as one of America's most unusual monsters. Turning now to our Department of Historical Oddities and the poet Virgil, possibly Rome's greatest poet, who wrote the Aeneid. He lived from 70 BC to 19 BC. And believe it or not, he once conducted an elaborate funeral for his pet fly. He had an extravagant funeral for a common housefly that he claimed was his favorite pet. He held a lavish funeral ceremony in his Roman mansion, replete with an orchestra to play for the event and the numerous celebrities who were present. Maecenas, Virgil's patron, even delivered a moving eulogy to the fly. And to top it off, Virgil himself wrote several poems about the fly and read them at the ceremony. The fly was then buried in a special mausoleum on Virgil's estate. The entire event cost Virgil the equivalent of about $100,000 in today's currency. Why all this pomp and circumstance for a mere fly? Was Virgil insane? Was he seeking publicity? Or was there another answer? It appears that Virgil had insider information that the Roman Senate was about to enact legislation calling for the confiscation of all private properties to be redistributed to war veterans, with one exception. No property would be confiscated that had a mausoleum on it. When that legislation was enacted, believe it or not, the Roman Senate exempted Virgil's property because of the mausoleum. In other words, holding a funeral for a fly wasn't such a bad idea after all. Turning now to spontaneous human combustion. Do you know that some people actually burst into flames and die from burning to death? There are actually 150 documented such cases dating back to the 1600s. The vast majority involve women, and most of these cases involve individuals over the age of 50. An early description was made in 1725 by Dr. Claude Nicolas Lecotte, a respected physician. In Reims, France, he was at an inn. Suddenly, he heard a commotion. He rushed downstairs to find the innkeeper's wife, or what was left of her, smoldering in a chair. Her head, legs, and the chair she was in remained intact, but her body itself was charred. This is one of the unusual aspects of this phenomenon. The body burns, but the surroundings do not. This strongly suggests that the fire originates within the body itself. Has anyone ever survived spontaneous human combustion? In 1985, Paul Castile, a 25-year-old man, was walking down a London street about 9 p.m. Suddenly, his body exploded into flame. He started to run down the street in panic. Then, fearing he was dying, he crouched down in the fetal position on the ground. But doing that actually snuffed out the flames, and his life was saved. So if any of you viewers out there find yourselves spontaneously combusting, don't go for water, don't run. Try to smother out the flames on the spot. We don't want to lose any of you. By the way, scientists really do not understand this very well. Some think it's due to alcohol within the body causing an explosion. Others that it's due to a mixture of gases. And yet others that it's due to a static electrical charge. Whatever the reason, we know it's certainly one of the most intriguing phenomena in the annals of medicine. Now stay tuned for another theory concerning the death of the dinosaurs. Welcome back in time now for the ghosts of Nathan Hale. Hale was born back in 1755, attended Yale, and then became a teacher for 2 years before he joined the Continental Army. First as a lieutenant, then he was promoted in 1776 to the rank of captain. He was sent to New York to spy on the British, disguised as a schoolmaster. Apparently, he was an inept spy, for he was caught shortly thereafter and, of course, executed. His reputed last words were, "I regret that I have but one life to give for my country." Unfortunately, those were not his real last lines. What he really said was something like this: "It is the duty of every good officer to obey any orders given him by his commander-in-chief." Well, of course, you can see why some historian rewrote them. Now, for the ghost at his farmhouse. At the farmhouse in Connecticut that he had commissioned, ghosts have been seen throughout the years, including quite recently. One is that of his father, Deacon Hale. Another is a relative, Lieutenant Joseph Hale, reported in the cellar rattling chains. And another is a woman named Liz Carpenter, who appears in white and haunts the upstairs area. Among the eyewitnesses have been members of the local historical society. And I want to stress, no one has claimed to have seen the ghost of Nathan Hale himself, only his relatives. Now, I think that lends a degree of validity to this story. If someone was going to fabricate seeing a ghost at Nathan Hale's farmhouse, they certainly would have said they saw Hale's ghost itself. Instead, they've stayed strictly with the truth. This case has a high coefficient of credibility. Now, we recently heard about an amazing city of the future. It's called Arcosani, right here in the state of Arizona. Many people have tried to depict what the future will look like. Some believe that we are destined to live in hostile, dysfunctional environments plagued by acid rain, overcrowding, pollution, and crime. And some people might argue that the future is already here. Well, we traveled to the heart of the Arizona desert, 70 miles north of Phoenix, to look at one man's vision of the future, and this is what we found. Arcosani is a city of the future that has been under construction since the early 1970s. The brainchild of architect Paolo Soleri, this town of tomorrow will have one of the highest population densities on Earth. 5,000 people will live and work within the town's 25 acres of land. Compare this to New York City, where the population density is 37 people per acre, and Arcosani sounds claustrophobic. But the town, located within an 890-acre nature reserve, is a 25-story structure without automobiles, parking lots, gas stations, and city streets that take up a lot of unnecessary space. And families living here will have up to 2,000 square feet of living space. Solari's vision extends beyond cities and towns built on land. His other projects in the design phase include a city called Nova Noa 1. Housing 400,000 people, the city will be partially submerged in the ocean, and the people living there will work to study the ocean and harvest its resources. Another project is a city designed to explore the stars. Astronomo will house 70,000 and be used for interstellar transportation. Astronomo is designed like a double-skinned cylinder, lined with vegetation for food and the carbon dioxide-oxygen cycle. It will allow man to become a permanent traveler in space. This is a very impressive experiment that may well be the prototype of future cities, both on Earth and in space. Turning now to the realm of irony. Throughout the ages, many scientists have had their discoveries or inventions turned against them. Consider the case of the renowned Italian astronomer Galileo. Today, we consider the great Galileo Galilei, the Italian astronomer who refined the telescope, which revealed the arrangement of our solar system to the world for the first time. He actually observed the moons of Jupiter and discovered the existence of sunspots. His observations of the sun damaged his already weak retinas, contributing to the blindness that afflicted him during the final 5 years of his life. If that wasn't bad enough, his discoveries riled up the status quo, especially his assertion that the Earth rotates about the sun. Indeed, he was denounced as a heretic and summoned before the Inquisition in Rome and forced to recant his views. Later, he was even imprisoned. So, his beloved telescope caused two great tragedies in his life: blindness and imprisonment. And consider the case of Robert Bunsen, inventor of the famous Bunsen burner. Twice while using his Bunsen burner in experiments, he nearly died from arsenic poisoning. And another time, again using that burner, he lost his right eye due to a cyanide explosion. Just two intriguing cases from the realm of irony for your consideration. Next up, another intriguing theory concerning the demise of the dinosaurs. Please stay tuned. Welcome back, and time now for another theory concerning the death of the dinosaurs. Of course, we've heard that possibly an asteroid, comet, or meteor caused their death by slamming into our planet, or that it was due to widespread volcanic activity. But another theory argues that the moon destroyed the dinosaurs. Let's listen.
Every 10 million years or so, there's apparently some kind of tektite glass fall on the Earth. And now it turns out that the iridium-rich clay layer that is associated with the death of the dinosaurs was originally mostly microtektite glass. And so whatever produces tektite glass is the same mechanism that killed the dinosaurs. Every now and then, the moon has such a large volcanic eruption that tektite glass is sent to Earth. In the form of vast clouds of volcanic ash, microtektite glass, and also massive chunks of volcanic glass domes formed the crater in the Yucatan. These clouds of ash eventually formed equatorial ring around the Earth, much like the ring around Saturn. And in the winter hemisphere, the shade from this ring would lower the Earth's temperature enough to severely affect the dinosaurs. Back in the 1960s, Dean Chapman, a former NASA scientist in California, claimed all the Far East tektites were from the lunar crater Tycho. Tycho is a 56-mile diameter crater that's very fresh. Looks like it happened yesterday, but it could have happened 500 million years ago and still looked that fresh. And there's what appears to be a lot of volcanic features on the floor of Tycho and also on the rim. Most scientists that study this problem consider the moon to be volcanically dead for the last few billion years. But there's been many sightings of what is called lunar transient phenomena, which appear to be volcanic eruptions on the moon. In fact, there's a NASA publication with almost 1,500 different sightings over the last few hundred years, where they actually see red and orange glows as one type of sighting, and they may go away and then reoccur months later in the same spot. which indicates that there's some kind of lunar fire fountain volcanic eruption.
Thank you very much, Darrell. Most intriguing. Just in case this theory is correct, I think it calls for the immediate establishment of a base on the moon to look for early warning signs that might actually lead to saving ourselves from extinction. By the way, if you have a question or an answer for us, or an intriguing photo, call us at our toll-free number. That's 1-800-45-RULE, RUEHL. Now, until next time, may the power of the universe be with you. Be with you. Be with you. Be with you.